What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gage. Welcome to the channel. Today, I am excited to show off my Shoutmon, aka Crossheart, deck profile. This deck is a lot of fun to play. It has a lot of really nice looking Digimon cards, and towards the middle and the late game has a lot of different lines of play, so honestly can be difficult to pilot, but that is exactly why I enjoy playing the deck. It really is a thinker, and as long as you continue to practice with the deck, you will be able to make a lot of optimal plays that will help you to be able to compete in the modern metagame. It is by no means the strongest option for sure, but it has continued to get some support after its initial release, meaning that it still has the ability to take games. So before I hop into it, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's just go ahead and hop right into it. So for the eggs, I am playing 4 copies of Pikmons. This is just the best one that you can use because when attacking, if it has Crossheart in its traits, you could draw 1 card. So the entire deck is going to have Crossheart in its traits, meaning that as long as you are digivolving, usually with the rookies, you are going to be able to draw. And of course, drawing in any card game is going to be really good at increasing the consistency. So that is why you have to play the Pikmons. And the star of the show, the main rookie himself, is 4 copies of Shoutmon. So he has the ability where he's the searcher, so he reveals the top 3 cards of the deck, adds a Digimon and a Tamer card with Crossheart in the traits from among them to your hand. So this, again, is just really good at increasing the consistency of the deck. He also has the ability on deletion save. So you are going to see this as an ability for many of the Digimon in the deck. And essentially what that means is that if this were to die, whether you attack into security and it dies in security, or if your opponent attacks into it, essentially instead of going to the discard pile, it will go underneath one of your tamers, which you will then be using later on to use as a Digicross. And essentially what Digicrossing is, it's using your smaller pieces, so the different rookies in the deck and some of the different champions, to essentially come together to create a big Gundam-style Digimon that gains a bunch of different effects, is obviously a lot stronger, and then has all of the different inheritables that your Digimon have to make it that much more threatening to your opponent. So when you see the on deletion save, just know that that is usually going to be a Digimon that will be used for one of those pieces to build that big Gundam style Digimon. So the inheritable for Shoutmon is obviously the best one. When it has Shoutmon in its name, it gains Rush. So it means that you are going to be able to play some of your big boys and start swinging immediately, which obviously is really good at being able to pressure your opponent. So that is why you have to play 4 copies of Shoutmon. I am also playing 4 copies of Starmons. This one has on deletion save, so it'll go under a Tamer, but it also has the inheritable when attacking. If it has Shoutmon in the name, you draw a card. So again, another card that is very good at helping to draw into more of your cards so that you can continue to see more of your pieces or more of your bigger Digimon, so that if you already have your smaller Digimon and are ready to start Digicrossing and essentially morphing together to make your bigger boys, that means that you cards like Starmons and the inheritable that it provides just helps you to see those cards a lot more easily. And I am playing 4 copies of Sparrowmon. This isn't the best in terms of the having be a piece for a Digicross. However, it is still good. Worst case, you can still use this to Digivolve into your Pikmons. Sparrowmon is the one that shows up the least as a Digivolution requirement. You can use it to get into X5 and X7. However, you can't use it to get into X3 or X4. But I still want to be able to max out on as many copies of the pieces as possible, just so that I have as many chances of being able to Digicross into a bigger Digimon. This also has an alright inheritable where it gives your Digimon reboot. So if you do use this to go into an X5, for example, that one is a Digimon that allows you to swing and get an extra security check, and it also has the ability to have blocker. So this is actually a really nice Digivolution card that you can put underneath it as a Digicross requirement because of the fact that it allows you to swing with your X5 and then stand it back up so that you gain multiple uses out of it. So you could use it as an attacker and as a blocker. But I can see an argument for cutting one of him to 3 so that just in case if for whatever reason you feel like he is too clunky, then you won't see him as often. So 4 Sparrowmon, in my opinion, is a decent option. And then I am playing 4 copies of Shoutmon Star Sword. Now hear me out. The reason that I play him is because he can also be treated as a Shoutmon or a Starmon. So he is a bridge piece in the event that, for whatever reason, if you are missing one of the pieces, you can cross in a pinch. And so he himself is also a Digimon that you can use to cross into. So he requires a Shoutmon and a Starmons. For each of the ones that you use, it would reduce the play cost by 1. So say you have the Shoutmon and Starmons in your hand, you can use both of them, tuck them underneath him, and then he will be essentially a cost of 3. And then his on play is all right. One of your opponent's Digimon gains minus 3,000 DP. Then if you are Digicrossing with 2 cards, which would be the Shoutmon and the Starmons, you could delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 2,000 DP or less, meaning that essentially a 5,000 or less will die. So it is really good at, again, just being an extra piece in a pinch, and that is why I have been playing him. He's been working for me. I see builds that either don't play him at all or they just play him at lower copies. But honestly, this has been working for me, and I highly encourage other people to test it as well. And then I am also playing 4 copies of Darulamon on play. It does have the ability to, as long as you have another Digimon or Tamer with Crossheart in its trace in play, one of your opponent's Digimon gains minus 3,000 DP for the turn, which allows you to essentially make it easier to attack into some of your opponent's Digimon, softening them up, since a lot of the lower end is pretty weak. So you really don't want to necessarily die, even if you do have the ability to save itself under a Tamer. And that's just really good. It also has an inheritable that says, while this Digimon has Shoutmon in its name, all of your opponent's security Digimon get minus 2,000. Again, this is good for all those times that you do just decide to start swinging. It makes it so that your Digimon are that much more likely to be able to survive the battle. So 4 copies of Darulamon. He is also a piece that you will use to get into your big boys as well. And 4 copies of Ballistamon on your opponent's turn if you have another Digimon or Tamer with Crossheart in its in play. It gains blocker, so it can be a blocker if necessary. It also has save, and then it also gives the inheritable, gives one of your bigger Digimon the ability piercing. So it means that you can start to take out some of your opponent's Digimon while also still putting pressure on your opponent's security. So yeah, you have to play 4 copies of Ballistamon, and it's an essential piece because Ballistamon as well as Darulamon are pretty much pieces for almost all of the crosses in the deck. And I am now playing 4 copies of Shoutmon X3, so he is one of the big boys that we are playing. On play, he can reveal the top 3 cards of the deck, add 2 cards with Crossheart and its traits from among them to your hand. As you can see, most of the deck is Crossheart, so this allows you to either get to some of the smaller guys to get access to more pieces, or you could start to search for your top end, either other copies of himself or the Cross 4, your Cross 5, you name it. This is really good because it requires Shoutmon, Ballistamon, and Darulamon, and if you do use all of them to cross into him, that means he is essentially going to be played for a cost of 1, which is just super busted. This is one of the best support cards to come out for the deck. It essentially replaces the Cross 4 that has since been limited and still continues to be limited to this day. So I highly recommend playing 4 copies of him. And as I mentioned, we are still playing the 1 copy of Cross 4. Unfortunately, he is still limited to 1 copy per deck. Honestly, I do think that he can come back to 4 copies, considering how much faster the game has gotten since he was hit. But let's see what actually makes him really good. On play, you draw 2 cards. Obviously, that's pretty good. A lot of the other cards in the deck are drawing, and so being able to play him means that you are getting more access to more of your cards. But he also has the ability where at the end of the attack, by placing all the Digivolution cards from under this Digimon under one of your Tamers, you can unsuspend a Tamer and delete this Digimon, essentially making it so that you have the ability to cross into your bigger boys multiple times in a turn. So I know that that can be a lot to wrap your head around, but once you get to practice with the deck, you'll see why that's actually a very powerful ability, and that's why they limited this card, because it essentially means that before he was limited, you are able to loop your tamers so that you can continue to go into multiple copies of Cross 4, draw cards every single time you do so, and yeah, it is pretty busted. So yeah, I think the game is still a lot faster considering, even with access to that play. So X4, he's still a good option even at 1. And I'm also playing 3 copies of Shoutmon X5. This one has security attack +1. It has blocker, and it is one of the ones that essentially requires almost all of the smaller guys to be able to make. So you could use it with Shoutmon, Ballistamon, Darulamon, Starmons, or Sparrowmon. And when you're digicrossing, you don't necessarily need to have every single one of your pieces. It just means that the more that you do have, the cheaper the cost will be. So as long as you say you did have access to all of your pieces, whether they were in your hand or under your tamers, that means if you do use them all, it'll be -2 for each, meaning you could potentially play the Cross 5 for free, which is obviously super busted. If you have Shoutmon underneath it, it is getting rushed, so you are bringing out a Digimon for free with security attack +1, and then if it has the Sparrowmon underneath it, as I alluded to earlier, once you attack at the end of your turn, he will stand back up so that he can be used as a blocker. I don't necessarily think you need 4 copies. As you can see, there are a ton of different cards that allow you to draw in the deck. So the deck is relatively consistent at being able to see these pieces, and so I think 3 copies is more than enough. And for the ultimate boss himself, we are playing 3 copies of X7 Superior Mode. He is absolutely busted. He essentially gives you the ability, as long as there is a Shoutmon in play, you could use that by playing this card from the hand. You could use the Shoutmon that is in play as a Digivolution card underneath him to then reduce the cost by 1, and you can place cards from the trash as Digivolution cards for this Digicross. So most of the time, when you are trying to morph all of your pieces to essentially make your big Gundam, your big Digimon, you have to do it by using the pieces from your hand or from under your tamers. What's crazy about the X7 Superior Mode is that by having access to using them from the trash, it means that all of the Digimon that, if they do just so happen to die and you choose not to save them for whatever reason, it gives those pieces additional utility. So this is crazy at the end game, because on play, it essentially allows you to return a Digimon that is in play and all the Digivolution cards under your opponent's deck, not sending it to the graveyard, not putting it back to your hand, just basically saying, all right, if you have a big Alphamon stack, for example, it's gone. It's going to the bottom of the deck. You don't have to think about it anymore. And then it has a second busted ability where all of your opponent's security effects on option cards don't activate, which means that you can start to swing into your security with him or some of your other small guys. You don't have to worry about Gaia Force. You don't have to worry about Chaos Degradation. It is honestly a game ender, and that is why I play 3 copies of him. Again, you don't need 4, just because you may not always... You're always drawing into cards, right? And there may be instances in which you don't necessarily have to go for him. So 3 copies has been working for me. I see him just enough, and honestly, this can be a game ender if you manage to get him into play. And last but not least, in terms of the Digimon, I am playing 3 copies of Shoutmon King version. He is also treated as Shoutmon, so if you do need to use him to cross into your X3, X4, etc., you can do so. However, on play, you could return a card with a Digivolution requirement, so that'll be your X3, your X4, X5, and so on. You can essentially grab it from the discard pile and add it back to your hand. So he is really good at not only being a requirement himself, but he also has the ability to grab cards back from the discard pile to give them extra utility for later on in the game if necessary. So I do like having him as an option, and there are instances in which his on play does come up to help you get into other big Digimon as well, because on play, not only can you return the card with the Digivolution requirement from the trash to your hand, when you would Digicross, you can use this Digimon to replace one of the requirements. So instead of, for example, needing to use Ballistamon, he can be used instead. And that is just really good. That's why I like playing 3 copies of him because, again, just like the Star Sword, he is a bridge piece. But I could see if you cut him down to 1 or just choose not to play him entirely. That's why I like this deck in particular, is that there are really many different ways to be able to play it. And this is just what so happens to work for me. That's it for the Digimon. Now to talk about the Tamers. I am playing 4 copies of Taiki Kudo. On play, reveal the top 4 cards of the deck, add a card with Crossheart and its traits to the hand, and then place 1 card with Crossheart and its traits from underneath this Tamer. So this helps to get things going. You are adding cards that you need to your hand, and then you're also tucking some of the Digivolution pieces underneath it. And this turn, when you would play a Digimon with a Digivolution requirement, so, you know, your King versions, your Cross 5s, etc., you can suspend this Tamer to place cards from under your Tamers as Digivolution cards for a Digi-Cross. So all those Digimon that you saw, the Starmons, the Shoutmons that have save, that when they would die, they go underneath your Tamer, this is the type of Tamer that you want to have in play so that you can then essentially use the cards that are underneath it for a Digi-Cross, so you don't have to worry about those cards being in your hand. So Taiki is the mainstay of the deck, and you really want to make sure that you are getting access to this as soon as possible so that you don't always have to use Digimon in your hand. You could just continue to recycle cards that may have already died or may have been tucked underneath them off his effect to be able to Digivolve into your big boys. So 4 copies of Taiki. I'm also playing 4 copies of Taiki, Kiriha, and Nene, which is one of the better support cards to come out for the deck after its initial release. At the start of the main phase, by placing a Digimon with Crossheart and its traits from the hand under this Tamer, you gain a memory and draw a card. Obviously, gaining memory is really good. It allows you to extend your plays. Drawing cards is really good. If you have multiple in play, that means you're gaining multiple memory, drawing multiple cards. The deck is super consistent, and that's why I want to be able to establish cards like this early on. And then on your turn, it also has a similar effect to the other Taiki, where it allows you to Digicross using the Digimon that are underneath your Tamers. So that is one of the things that this deck wants to do. You really want to be able to use your Digimon under your Tamers for crossing into your big boys, and Taiki, Kiriha, and Nene allows you to do that. I'm also playing 2 copies of Akari. This one does not allow you to use the to suspend itself to allow you to Digicross using Digimon under its Tamers, which is why I still only choose to play 2. However, it is all right. You can play a Darulamon from your hand or from under one of your Tamers without paying its memory cost. And then when you would play a Digimon with Crossheart and its traits, you can suspend it to draw a card. Just pretty good at being able to give you extra advantage every turn so that as you start to stack up multiple Tamers in play, you get that much more resources at your disposal. And the last 2 Tamers are Zenjiro. On play, you can play a Ballistamon from your hand or under one of your Tamers without paying its memory cost. And when you would play a Digimon with Crossheart and its traits, you could suspend this to gain a memory. Similar to Akari, it is, again, just giving you access to additional resources, in this case, memory. So, guys, that is it for the deck. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know that this deck is a lot. Honestly, this is not necessarily a beginner-friendly deck. I love all of the Digimon, all of the different Gundams that I can kind of go into, and the different powerful effects that these Digimon provide. And that is why I continue to have fun with this deck to this day. So if you really are looking for a challenging deck to play, but one that can be very rewarding, I highly recommend it. If you are playing this deck, what are some of the techs that you play? What are the different ratios that you choose to play for some of your Digimon? Are there Digimon you play that I am not playing? I definitely want to hear that in the comments. And until next time, thank you so much. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and take care.